Hello and welcome to Community Unitarian Universalist Church of Plano online. My name is Jeanette Bailey and I am one of the worship associates here at the church. At Community UU, we work for justice, nourish spirits, and transform lives. Whether you are a church member, a new or longtime visitor, or you just found this video online, may you find connection with us and food for your mind and spirit. Today's service features favorite guest speaker and musician, Kaya Hartwood, sharing a message about the power of cooperation with the wolves of Yellowstone. Natural life is not simply survival of the fittest. There is much more to understand about cooperation within and between species that we can learn from and consider within the human sphere. Kaya Hartwood holds a Master's of Divinity from the Star King School for the Ministry and is a UU ministerial candidate. Kaya has a long career as a musician, speaker, and creator of good in the world. She is based in Austin, Texas, and also currently serves the churches of UU Victoria, Texas, and UU of the Brazos Valley. Please get comfortable and enjoy the music and the message for today. Spirit of life and love, we gather together in different ways this morning. From computer screens, from telephones, we gather reaching out across the wires, waving from a safe distance, to come together in religious community. From living room to front porch to car seat, we gather as we are able, ready to be of service to each other and to the world, ready to build the community of hope and love. As we face this bright morning, we are apart, but we are together, offering our love, our commitment, our hope, and our prayers in service to one another and this world. It is a new way, but an old way, that we come together in worship today. As we light this chalice today, may it serve to give us clarity of purpose and illumine our way as we set about doing the work of this congregation in commitment, in cooperation, and in love. Unitarian Universalism is a covenantal denomination. We hold that we do not have to believe alike in order to love alike. In this and every UU community, there is a diversity of personal creeds, but there is one covenant for our church. And this covenant is about the ways we promise to be in relationship with each other and the wider community. We recommit ourselves to these promises each time we recite this church's covenant, and each time we gather, we recite it again. Please join with me now. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will.
benefit of the spiritual community is sharing our happiness and our burdens. Please use the chat feature in your Zoom window to share with us what is on your heart today. Joys that are shared may be doubled, and sorrows that are shared may be reduced.
Sometimes a wild god. Sometimes a wild god comes to the table. He is awkward and does not know the ways of porcelain, a fork, and mustard and silver. His voice makes vinegar from wine. When the wild god arrives at the door, you will probably fear him. He reminds you of something dark that you might have dreamt, or the secret you do not wish to be shared. He will not ring the doorbell. Instead, he scrapes with his fingers, leaving blood on the paintwork. Though primroses grow in circles round his feet, you do not want to let him in. You are very busy. It is late or early, and besides, you cannot look at him straight because he makes you want to cry. Your dog barks, the wild god smiles. He holds out his hands, and the dog licks his wounds, then leads him inside. The wild god stands in your kitchen. Ivy is taking over your sideboard. Mistletoe has moved into the lampshades, and wrens have begun to sing, an old song in the mouth of your kettle. I haven't much, you say, and give him the worst of your food. He sits at the table bleeding. He coughs up foxes. There are otters in his eyes. When your wife calls down, you close the door and tell her it's fine. You will not let her see. The strange guest at your table, the wild god asks for whiskey, and you pour a glass for him, then a glass for yourself. 3 snakes are beginning to nest in your voice box. You cough. Oh, limitless space. Oh, eternal mystery. Oh, endless cycles of death and birth. Oh, miracle of life. Oh, the wondrous dance of it all. You cough again. Expectorate, the snakes, and water down the whiskey. Wonder how you got so old, and where your passion went. The wild god reaches into a bag made of moles and nightingale skin. He pulls out a two-reeded pipe, raises an eyebrow, and all the birds begin to sing. The fox leaps into your eyes. Otters rush from the darkness. The snakes pour through your body. Your dog howls, and upstairs, your wife both exults and weeps at once. The wild god dances with your dog. You dance with the sparrows. A white stag pulls up a stool and bellows hymns to enchantments. A pelican leaps from chair to chair. In the distance, warriors pour from their tombs. Ancient gold grows like grass in the fields. Everyone dreams the words to long-forgotten songs. The hills echo and the gray stones ring. With laughter and madness and pain, in the middle of the dance, the house takes off from the ground. Clouds climb through the windows. Lightning pounds its fist on the table, and the moon leans in. The wild god points to your side. You are bleeding heavily. You have been bleeding for a long time, possibly since you were born. There is a bear in the wound. Why did you leave me to die? Asks the wild god, and you say, I was busy surviving. The shops were all closed. I didn't know how. I'm sorry. Listen to them. The fox in your neck, and the snakes in your arms, and the wren, and the sparrow, and the deer, the great unnameable beasts in your liver, and your kidneys, and your heart. There is a symphony of howling, a cacophony of dissent. The wild god nods his head, and you wake on the floor holding a knife, a bottle, and a handful of black fur. Your dog is asleep on the table. Your wife is stirring far above. Your cheeks are wet with tears. Your mouth aches from laughter or shouting. A black bear is sitting by the fire. Sometimes a wild god comes to the table. He is awkward and does not know the ways of porcelain, of fork, and mustard, and silver. His voice makes vinegar from wine and brings the dead to life. Tom Hirons.
The first rule of conservation is that collaboration is the best way to go. Yellowstone was one of the first UNESCO World Heritage Sites. It represents that moment when we decided to protect nature for the collective good. Here on the north rim of the Yellowstone Grand Canyon, you can see how the park got its name, plus a whole bunch of other wonderful colors. It is a dazzling landscape. And it's also an incredibly marvelous place ecologically, so it's more than beautiful, it's also magical in terms of its ecological interactions.
Wolves were well established in Yellowstone when the park was designated in 1872. They are arguably one of the most controversial forms of wildlife on the planet. And we've been at odds with them, certainly over agriculture and now over hunting, for a long time. They are this cultural enigma to us. We killed them every chance we got. And it's only been in the last 3 or 4 decades that there's been a movement of people to say, maybe they're not so bad.
The restoration of the wolf after a 70-year absence is truly a phenomenal event. And now, in our 15th year, we see a very robust, healthy wolf population acting in this system much like it would have thousands of years ago. Wolf restoration has really improve the biodiversity of this region. We think with this top predator back on the landscape, we're seeing an impact across a large scale of food chain levels.
We went from 31 wolves to over 300 in the first 10 years, where there are 3 to 4 times as many wolves and as many packs outside of Yellowstone Park as there are inside. You have to look at the impacts of that on productivity of elk, which are the primary prey species of wolves, productivity of the vegetation, and aspen is like ice cream to elk. It's a favorite food. But with the introduction of wolves, the elk population behavior has changed. So what we've got now is this opportunity for some of these smaller aspen to get above the browsing height of an elk. These aspens have a very good chance of replacing these older aspens that are now dying out.
Through IUCN's World Commission on Protected Areas, we've been able to assemble a group of people and organizations from around the world who are interested in connectivity conservation. The story of Yellowstone's wolves is not only the story of Yellowstone Park, it's also an example of the bigger issue of how parks need to be part of landscapes that are much bigger. They need to be connected.
Large carnivores on the landscape are something when we didn't have 300 million people living in the United States. Wildlife now, in this day and age, lives in fragmented landscapes. It's very rare to find continuous suitable habitat anywhere. We can't have these islands. The islands become isolated and the genetics and other things fade.
One of the big questions about the recovery of wolves is to what degree are these populations connected genetically, physically? And so part of our research is trying to understand the degree to which wolves move around the landscape, reproduce, and contribute to gene flow.
Yellowstone actually can't function as an island. It actually needs to be part of a bigger system that goes from Yellowstone all the way up into the Yukon in northern Canada. We have to think at that scale, connecting these reserves, not allowing them to become little island fortresses, or they will become islands of extinction. And that large-scale conservation is sometimes called connectivity conservation.
We need these large networks of wild habitat to support these animals and ensure their future. Wolves are very much a symbol of wilderness. They're a symbol of something that was very much a part of our wildlife heritage in the past, very much of a symbol of what we have lost, but more importantly, a symbol of what we now have gained. A large part of the success of Yellowstone wolves has been the bringing together of people. That's really a testament to the value that human societies play, and that coming together, working in different organizations to achieve a common goal.
Are we going to save some places? Wolves are a great test for that mindset. Can we do it? Can we bring them back? And not just to settled landscapes, but let them exist in those wild places.
This morning I'm talking about the wolves of Yellowstone and how they were brought back. There was a program that began in the mid-90s to bring the wolves back. They hadn't been in the park. The last wolf was killed about 1926, so there's a whole long string of years where there were no wolves. There are other predators in the Yellowstone area. There's bears, cougars, coyotes, foxes, things like that. But the balance of the elk, which is the primary food of the wolves, what happened when there were no more wolves was the elk herds overgrazed and they started starving, and the quality of their health as a unit went down. When the wolves were reintroduced, they were brought down from Canada. A group of about 31 wolves were brought down and gradually acclimatized and released into the wild. And I'm going to tell you the story of one particular pack. It's usually named after the area in the park that they live. And I want to tell you the story of the Druid Peak Pack, starting with a wolf named Number 8. Number 8 was an alpha wolf who was the smallest in his litter. He was so little that he got beat up all the time by his brothers and his sisters too. And wolf number 8 grows up and becomes the alpha male accidentally, because the original alpha male in this pack, number 38, was killed outside the park illegally. Many people were very upset about the wolves being brought into the Yellowstone area, especially ranchers, because they thought that they would prey on their cattle. That turned out to not be the case. Again, wolves' favorite food, although they eat bison as well, is elk. And they've proven that, because the great thing about the whole wolf project in Yellowstone is led by a ranger named Doug Smith, and they have been watching the wolves now for over 25 years. And so we've learned a lot of things, and some of those things apply to bigger ideas like the survival of the fittest. So, basic story of the Druid Peak Pack is that this tiny wolf, small in stature, number 8, was very bright and took the opportunity and managed to mate with an alpha female that had a number of pups. And the way that wolf society works, in our society, we kind of tend to think that the alpha male runs everything, but that's actually not true. What they found is that the alpha female usually runs and coordinates the pack. And alpha male's primary responsibility is to provide food and protection for the other members of the pack and the babies as they're growing up, the pups that need a lot of protection and warmth and food. So usually what happens with the wolves is they live in the park. They tend to live 4 or 5 years as the average. A wolf has been known to live as long as 12, 13 years. But for the most part, the wolves that live inside the park live 4 or 5 years, and the wolves that are outside the park usually get shot. They don't live as long, 2 or 3 years is the average. So our wolves, led by a female named 30 and the male number 8. Male number 8 becomes the foster father for these 8 pups that have lost their alpha male. And the female wolf, struggled to protect the pups and feed them at the same time. It's really difficult to raise pups by yourself. There's not enough eyes on the whole thing to protect them while they're vulnerable. And you can't be watching and keeping the pups warm and be hunting at the same time. So it's kind of a catch-22. So if you go off to hunt because you're starving and you need to eat so that you can nurse the pups are vulnerable to any traveling wolves. Usually wolves are the ones that kill them, or bears, or any other problem that the pups might get into. So the more adults associated with the pack, the safer the pack is, and more likely that the pups are going to survive and you're going to continue on. Well, 8 adopted these pups, including a young pup named 21. So 8's the alpha male. And when he was attacked by a rival, something strange happened. Usually when they fight, he was fighting a wolf that was much larger than him, and the assumption is that the smaller wolf is going to lose. But these 2 gray wolves looked very similar, and they fought. And the wolf watchers were watching all this and expecting the worst for wolf number 8. But what happened was unusual. Wolf number 8 won. And when the other submissive wolf bared its neck so that 8 could kill it. 8 let it live. And one of the pups that saw this was a wolf named 21, a black wolf. A dog gene had gotten into the wolf DNA that brought the black coat cover. And half the wolves in Yellowstone are black. So you have gray wolves and black wolves, kind of an equal number of females and males, an equal number of black and gray wolves. And wolves need to mate with mates that are not from their close family relatives. So they tend to travel a little and make new alliances, and so new packs form. A typical pack is under 10 wolves. And they have to have enough hunting region to support their family and defend their area from other wolves and newer packs that are coming up all the time. So 8 raises this wolf named 21. Now, in the meantime, in the Druid Valley, there is a wolf named 40 who has a sister named 42. They tend to call 42 Cinderella. But 40 is the alpha male, and she's very vicious, to the point that she goes and kills the pups of her sisters, her younger subordinate sisters. And this happens a couple of times to wolf number 42, Cinderella. So 40 is the top alpha female. She's basically running the pack. And her mate and she are the primary breeding pair, and she has a litter of pups. Well, 42 in the meantime has made alliances with some of the other subordinate females who also may or may not have pups. And what happens is the next time 40 comes to beat up on 42 and kill her pups, well, 42's cavalry come in, and 40 is found killed by the females in her pack. And so now 42 becomes the dominant female, the alpha female. And the alpha male has died, also being shot outside the park. So 21 is now a young adult and looking for a home. And 21 meets 42. And that's really the beginning of the heyday of the Druid pack. And that's who I want to talk about specifically. Now, 21 never lost a fight ever. There's a huge black gray wolf. And he and 42 had a love bond. They both lived to be almost 9 years old. They were the dominant pair. And 21 had seen his father, his adopted father, 8, spare a rival. And what's interesting about 21 is although he won all the fights, he was very attentive to the pups of all the females in his pack, that whether they were his offspring or not. And he and 42 mated almost every year. So what happens when the rivals start coming and attacking 21? One, he beats them all, and then he lets them live. And what happens is that there starts being a wider circle of adult wolves to support the up to 21 pups that the Druid Peak wolves are supporting. At one time, this pack got to be 31 and was the dominant pack in Yellowstone up until about 2004. So from 1998 to 2004, the Druid Peak pack with the various alpha males from 8, and then his adopted foster son 21. And 21 is really the one everyone talks about. There's plenty of videos if you want to see more about them. And what I think is interesting about them is he really played a lot with the pups, and he would hang out with them and he would play as if he was submissive. So he taught the pups how to win. and how to be strong. And he was very gentle with them. He had a lot of empathy, and he didn't kill his rivals. So that changed wolf culture in Yellowstone. Meantime, wolves are changing Yellowstone in general because when you have wolves feeding on the elk population stays down, and wolves mostly kill the very young, the ill, and the injured. They have an incredible sense of smell, and so if you even had like a bad tooth in your head and you were a bison and you were walking around, the wolves could smell the disease in your mouth. That's how good their smell is, their sense of smell. And they work together to tire out the animals and what they call the herd. Now, some people identify this as survival of the fittest, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But here's the main thing. In the time that the wolves have been back in the park, the elk population isn't starving anymore. It's actually more healthy because the breeding happens between the healthiest members of the herd, and you're not overgrazing. So the aspen trees are coming back. The wolves have literally changed the flow of the river in Yellowstone. There's lots of videos out there. I know the ones I've shown you show a little bit about this, but what's interesting about it is that we don't understand as humans how the earth works and how diversity works and how the combination of effects and tensions between the different populations make the web of existence work better. Often the predators are working on the same prey. The birds are living off of, the coyotes are living off of, the wolves are living off of, and occasionally the bears are stealing the wolves' food and vice versa. Cougars and coyotes, everybody is eating off these large grass eaters, bison and elk, and keeping the populations and the herd healthier and sharper. And because Yellowstone is protected, and there's a project there where they put radio collars. They know where the wolves are going. They know what they're eating. They're able to watch them many times for hours and hours at a time, for years at a time. And so that we get the stories of these wolves. If you want to read more about it, you can read about Wolf 8 and Wolf 21, and then a later version 2 by one of the rangers who have been monitoring the wolves for many, many, many years, like 20 years. So it's a very fascinating story. So you get the exciting story of the individuals, but you're also able to see how it works together. And what does this have to do with us, and what can we learn from this? Well, the whole idea of Darwinism and the survival of the fittest that came up in the 19th century really lended itself to the arguments for colonialism and for a hierarchy and the idea of progress, and that the fittest will survive and the weak will die, and that will improve humanity in general. Only it's just not true. That's not really what Darwin found out. That's not really what evolution presents. The scientific evidence does not support that this is what makes things better. The survival of the fittest doesn't. Perhaps it's the survival of the kindest and the most adaptable, as Darwin says. And cooperation, not competition, might be the driving force for progression of a species, kind of like what 8 and 21 did with the wolf population. Changes the culture of the wolves, and they're able to survive. Now they're being attacked. The Druid pack goes down primarily from people hunting because the wolves cross over out of the park. And now Montana, for one, is having a yearly wolf hunt. So people buy hunting licenses and they're allowed to hunt wolves. So it keeps the wolf population down outside the park. but it also affects the research and it changes the dynamics of the herd. We're not able to just watch a natural progression when human beings are interfering. And road mange from domestic dogs has really affected the wolves. And the Druid Peak pack as a unit has disappeared, but many of their progeny are now parts of other packs in the park. The bloodline is still there. But I think it's a really good story. And what I think we should think about from a Unitarian Universalist standpoint and a human standpoint is, one, to be reminded how little we actually know about how the earth works and how the natural progressions work. And that we should be a little more humble and not make decisions that may affect the whole planet when we don't actually understand how the planet works. And studying a microcosm like studying the wolves is a great way to get a handle on that. I also encourage you to read up a little bit about the difference between survival of the fittest, the Darwinism of the 19th century, and what scientific research has come to, the conclusions that they have come to since then that are perhaps a little bit more accurate about how it all actually works. And as we as Unitarian Universalists are trying to spread our view to being more diverse and more complex and not so bilateral, which is a real white supremacy thing, it's this or it's that. It could be a combination, a complicated combination of much more than just two sides of the coin. I think it's worth looking into. I hope you have I hope you enjoy watching the videos of the wolves, and I would love to talk to you more about this. Thank you.
Our wish at Community UU Church is to cultivate a spirit of gratitude and generosity in all things. This beloved community is a living thing, and we bring much to it by our presence, our love, our caring, our generosity, and our hard work. We may be fed by it in equal or even larger measure. We encourage you to give as you are able, so that the good works of our church may continue. We also remind you that the Share the Plate beneficiary for the month of August 2021 is Barron Elementary School in the Plano Independent School District. Your donations help with the purchase of supplies and items that support the students, teachers, and staff at the school. So how can you make your donation? You can donate by sending a check to the church building address, which you can find on the front page of our website. You can also donate online by visiting our website and clicking on the blue Donate Now button on the front page. On behalf of our community, your generosity is deeply appreciated. As our worship draws to a close, it is time for us to extinguish the chalice. Please recite these words with me now. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Remember the way of the wind, and breathe and blow. Remember the way of the fire, sparkle and glitter and glow. Remember the way of the water, and ebb and flow. Remember the way of the earth, and grow. Go in peace.